So jazz vinyl carries a somewhat undeserved reputation that it's an expensive genre to collect. And while that's certainly the case for a lot of vintage jazz records on the legendary legacy labels, there are so many wonderful, inexpensive records out there. And this Charlie Rouse LP is a great example of that. Just awesome, straight ahead session, released not long after his Strata East date that's being reissued. Also liner notes from Yusuf Lateef, if you care about that sort of thing. And you should, because it's cool. This is what I call a anti-CTI record from Joe Farrell, for lacking many of the commercial elements that blight the label. Wonderful post-bop album. Opens up with a lot of spaciousness, a lot of stretching out from an excellent ensemble. Elvin Jones, Chick Corea, Buster Williams, just great. Moongerms follows this and is even less commercial. I mean, this is really pushing the boundaries of a CTI date. But I think both of these albums are just essential, and they're two of my favorites from the label. Definitely check them out. So this is pretty neat. This is actually a release of alternate outtakes from Max Roach's legendary band with Clifford Brown, effectively a demo that Roach made to share with labels and get a record cut. And years later, realizing he still had the tapes, he released them on Mainstream, which sound very good considering. So no replacement for those legendary albums, but a pretty cool slice of history for $6, featuring Clifford Brown at the height of his powers. Clifford Jordan and the Magic Triangle, The Highest Mountain. So this features one of the same quartets from around the same time as Jordan's Glass Bead Games, which is a quite expensive Strata East release. But this LP costs just a little less, whether you find it on Inner City or its mother label Steeplechase. Great cerebral playing on this, and one that would likely be far more expensive had it been released elsewhere. Check it out. If you haven't already noticed, I share jazz records on this channel, sometimes funk and soul, that you can find at least somewhat affordably in record stores and online. So subscribe if you like this kind of thing. I do these videos every now and then. Anyway, this is another wonderful release from Lucky Thompson on the Groove Merchant label. Occasionally airy, atmospheric, but overall pretty straight. Lucky's heavy swing influences on full display. Just very calm, very melodic playing. I like him for a lot of the same reasons I love Coleman Hawkins. I've had this release actually for a while, and more recently picked up Goodbye, but noted there's actually a twofer where you can get both of these sessions at once, and it's very much worth doing. Check them out. So by the time Blue Mitchell gets to Mainstream, his best work is really behind him. Right, his cult status was achieved through his Blue Note output. And while his Mainstream stuff can be kind of hit or miss, I really like the first album he did, which isn't Cheap Cheap. And I like this one, Last Tango Equals Blues. Just a jam, grooving, funky, of the period for sure, but I think Mitchell does a nice job without it becoming too passé. I also like this, Vital Blue. I think I like this because it's rooted a bit more in the bop idiom, and I think that's where Mitchell is most at home. I feel kind of similar about this Curtis Fuller record. This is one of my favorite Mainstream titles, and really far out there for Fuller in terms of fusion, and he does a great job on this. But like a lot of these guys, when they invariably boomerang back and make a hard bop record, it's really illuminating. It really illustrates like how grounded they are in this language. They're just masters. And this is a wonderful example of that. I think this is as good as any of Fuller's earlier output, if not a little harder to secure stateside, right? This is on Timeless, that's a Dutch label. A little pricier than Cheap, right? But absolutely worth getting. And you can find Timeless every now and then too here in the States in record stores. I recently picked this up. This is a great record from Chet Baker that was done, I think, in the early 80s on Timeless. Yeah, I don't even remember where I was going with this. Do whatever you want. I don't care. All right, one more Joe Farrell record. This is Penny Arcade, getting a bit more commercial, a bit more mainstream. But like all these Farrell CTI records, it remains uncompromised. His groups just have more edge to them. And on this, great grooves. Herbie Hancock is amazing. Steve Gadd is amazing on this. More on the funk fusion side of things, but within that style, top-rate jazz. The original Selfie, Cecil Taylor for Olim. Taylor's later output on solo piano is really interesting, sometimes difficult music, but this record, despite being quite free, isn't really going to scatter any pigeons. When I listen to this, at least, I really hear from Taylor like a series of vignettes where he's sharing an idea with you, and if you don't like that idea, you can just wait 30 seconds and he'll have another one. Or you'll just be really bored, and that's okay too. You don't have to like everything. But for 12 to 15 bucks, this record on Soul Note or his stuff on Arista, like I think it's called Speaking in Tongues, they're great and definitely worth checking out. Excellent record from Pepper Adams. This is a very well-recorded live date featuring a huge sound from Pepper Adams's baritone sax, especially alongside George Mraz, who was kind of this larger-than-life bass tone. This was originally released on Enja, but here on Inner City. Wonderful record from start to finish. If you don't have this, I would highly encourage you to pick it up. Stitt in Style. So Sonny Stitt put out a ton of records, and his later dates especially are not always all that great. But this is a good one, and very much in the spirit of those Verve and Roost LPs that Stitt put out earlier in his career. He, along with Barry Harris, who's also on this, were really bebop stylists, right? So this session is really grounded in those roots. Masterful playing on this. Nice recording from Rudy Van Gelder. Bad Chick on the cover. What's not to like here for $6? Not a huge bossa nova guy myself, but I do love Luiz Bonfa. This is an early record of his, done in '56. This one I'm holding as a '60s reissue, but the earlier US releases are also not that expensive. But being that this came out in '56, this is not actually bossa nova, I think you would consider this samba. Someone can school me in the comments, but I like the sound of this, and I think you will too. Check it out. Herbie Mann suffers from a degree of prejudice owing to his commercial success, but his early output really strips all that away. This is actually his first record on Bethlehem, originally released as a 10-inch actually, and it was reissued as a 12, I think in '56, with a couple more tracks added. But it's a really nice record and quite affordable because it's really not all that sought after. These are actually some of the very first jazz records I ever bought. I don't even think I knew who Herbie Mann was. I just picked these out of the lineup, but then soon after discovered Mangus. I was like, forget these records. No, I'm just kidding. These are good LPs, worth seeking out. Check them out. This by Jan Garberk, classic ECM, moody, Viking ambient jazz. This is actually one of the Penguin Jazz Guide's core collection albums. So for the uninitiated, there's like 9 or 10 of these books now. They're mostly out of print and expensive, but they're wonderful guides. And within each book, they give a very select few albums a sort of essential designation, some of which you might expect. So for example, like this, but others are actually very surprising choices and not at all that expensive. So what I will do is include a link in the description of this video that you can check out. Someone actually compiled all the core collection records into a single table online. So while you need the book to read the physical reviews, it's a cool list to check out. Maybe there's a few records on there at your local store that aren't that expensive. And even if you don't agree with the designation, they're all really interesting. Check it out. Straying a bit from jazz here, but I love these Lattimore records on Glades. And they often show up in record stores and are pretty cheap. Just wonderful soul infused with funk and blues. Great rhythm sections, drum, bass driven, recorded at Muscle Shoals. Just a big fan of these records. But anyway, that's all I got for today, folks. Until next time, I will catch you on the flip side and leave you with this amazing cover of my man Lattimore. Take it easy.